Arthur Schopenhauer was a German philosopher who is often called the philosopher of pessimism. His ideas were deeply influenced by Eastern philosophies like Buddhism and Hinduism, as well as by Western thinkers like Immanuel Kant and Plato. Schopenhauer's philosophy is unique because it combines deep insights into human suffering with a profound understanding of the nature of reality. At the heart of his philosophy is the concept of the will, a blind, irrational force that drives all of existence. Today, we will explore his key ideas, his thoughts, and some of his famous quotes to understand his worldview. Schopenhauer's most famous work is The World as Will and Representation. In his book, he explains that the world we experience is divided into two aspects: the world as it appears to us, which is the representation, and the world as it really is, which is the will. Schopenhauer agrees with Kant that the world we see is not the world as it truly is. Our senses and minds shape reality into something we can understand. For example, when we see a tree, we don't see the tree itself, but a mental image of it. Schopenhauer calls this the world of representation. Beneath the world of representation lies the true essence of reality, which is called the will. The will is a blind, endless, and irrational force that drives everything in the universe. It is the energy behind growth, desire, and survival. For example, plants grow towards the sun, animals hunt for food, and humans strive for success, all because of the will. Schopenhauer believed that the will is the source of all suffering. Because the will is never satisfied, humans are constantly driven by desires, only to be disappointed when those desires are fulfilled. As he famously said, "Life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. When we don't get what we want, we feel pain. When we do get what we want, we feel boredom." This endless cycle is the root of human suffering. Schopenhauer is known for his pessimistic view of life. He believed that suffering is an essential part of existence. Unlike other philosophers who saw suffering as something to be overcome, Schopenhauer saw it as inevitable. He argued that the world is fundamentally a place of struggle and pain. One of his most striking quotes is, "Life is a business that does not cover the costs." By this, he meant that the pain and effort we put into living far outweigh the joy we get out of it. For example, we work hard to achieve our goals, but once we achieve them, we often find them unsatisfying. This is because the will always pushes us toward new desires, leaving us in a constant state of wanting. Schopenhauer's pessimism was influenced by his observation of nature. He saw that animals kill each other to survive, and humans harm each other out of greed and ambition. He believed that the world is a cruel place where suffering is the norm, not the exception. Despite his pessimism, Schopenhauer offered a way to escape suffering. He believed that by understanding the nature of the will, we could free ourselves from its grip. Here are some of his suggestions. Aesthetic experience. Schopenhauer believed that art and beauty could provide a temporary escape from the will. When we look at a beautiful painting or listen to music, we forget our desires and lose ourselves in the moment. He called this a state of will-less contemplation. Compassion. Schopenhauer argued that compassion is the highest moral virtue. By recognizing that all living beings are driven by the same will and suffer in the same way, we can develop empathy and kindness towards others. He said, compassion is the basis of all morality. Asceticism. The ultimate way to overcome the will, according to Schopenhauer, is through asceticism, a life of self-denial and detachment. By giving up desires and worldly pleasures, we can weaken the power of the will and achieve a state of peace. This idea is similar to the Buddhist concept of nirvana. Schopenhauer was one of the first Western philosophers to study Eastern philosophies like Buddhism and Hinduism. He was deeply impressed by their emphasis on overcoming desire and achieving inner peace. For example, the Buddhist idea that desire is the root of suffering closely aligns with Schopenhauer's view of the will. He also admired the Hindu concept of Maya, which teaches us that the world is an illusion. Schopenhauer saw this as similar to his own idea, that the world of representation is not the true reality. Schopenhauer's philosophy was not very popular during his lifetime, but it had a huge influence on later thinkers, artists, and writers. His ideas about the will and suffering inspired philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche, who initially admired Schopenhauer but later rejected his pessimism. Sigmund Freud was also influenced by Schopenhauer's concept of the unconscious mind. Writers like Leo Tolstoy, Thomas Mann, and Samuel Beckett were inspired by Schopenhauer's bleak but profound view of life. Even scientists like Albert Einstein admired Schopenhauer's insight into human nature. Here are some of Schopenhauer's most famous quotes, which capture the essence of his philosophy. Man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. This means that while we can choose our actions, we cannot choose our desires. Our desires are driven by the will, which is beyond our control. The second quote here is, "Every man takes the limit of his own field of vision for the limits of the world." Schopenhauer believed that people often mistake their personal experiences for universal truths. This quote reminds us to be humble and, of course, open-minded. The third quote I have here is, "The two enemies of human happiness are pain and boredom." This summarizes Schopenhauer's view of life as a constant struggle between suffering and dissatisfaction. And the last quote I have here is, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." Schopenhauer had great respect for geniuses who he believed could see beyond the illusions of the world. Arthur Schopenhauer's philosophy is a powerful exploration of human suffering and the nature of reality. His concept of the will as a blind driving force behind all existence is both fascinating and unsettling. While his pessimism can seem bleak, his ideas about art, compassion, and the will offer a way to find meaning and peace in a world full of suffering. Schopenhauer's philosophy challenges us to look beyond our desires and see the world as it truly is. As he once said, "The world is my representation." By understanding this, we can begin to free ourselves from the endless cycle of wanting and find a deeper sense of fulfillment. In a world that often feels chaotic and meaningless, Schopenhauer's wisdom remains as relevant as ever.